You're listening to Spark TV, where we bring you daily interviews with real women in business at all stages. I'm your host, Danielle Lewis, and I am so grateful to have you here. Thuy, welcome to Spark TV. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Danielle. It's so great to be here.
Amazing. Now, let's start out by telling everyone who you are and what you do.
All right, so my name's Thuy, and I have been in business for over 25 years. I
What?
started,
Okay, you're going to have war stories.
I actually started my business when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
And the way it all got started, it was actually all just by accident, right? So my brother was one of those really incredible people who always did well at school. He always got those A pluses and ended up with a really high ATAR and got into dentistry. And 20 years ago, especially if you're in a migrant, have a migrant background, if somebody has succeeded, then all the family friends want their child to be just like that person. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so
Yeah.
my brother ended up tutoring up to 30 students, just going to their houses and helping them out. And he was also in the army at the time. And so it was just a bit too much for him to handle. So then my parents had an office, and we just invited all the students to come to that office. And I just started teaching a few students. My brother started teaching a few students, and it just grew from there. And so now,
Wow.
um, I have a franchise business. We have 16 campuses around Melbourne, or yeah, around Melbourne, and we've just been named preferred supplier for all Australian schools.
Oh
So
my
we're going to
God.
be
Wow.
supplying our resources to Australian schools, and we're really, really excited because we've built our own IP around how children learn. Because what we've discovered is that children don't just learn at one level, which is what we
Mm.
assume. Students actually learn on a spectrum, right? And so at any one time, students will simultaneously be ahead in certain areas. Just say if you're in year five, they might be advanced in addition, but then they might actually be quite behind in measurement, or they might
Mm.
be at level in fractions, right? So what we've developed is a five-band system. So we have,
Wow.
yeah, so we've got the core. Every student who comes through Spectrum completes a multi-level assessment to find out what their core is. And then from there, students will always have access to 2 year levels below and 2 year levels ahead. So, um, because, even if a student is advanced in a certain topic, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're always going to be advanced. So they always need to have that foundational knowledge. So what we've done is we've mapped it to Earth's five elements. So we've got
Oh, cool.
so we've got band -2, which is Earth, and that's stabilizing. So we have engagement activities and introductory activities just to set the tone for learning. We then have band -1, which is where we explicitly teach the content. So for example, if I provide an example, we've got just say if we're teaching a student how to add fractions with uncommon denominators, the Earth level will just be uh, you know, revising their multiplication and division, because they're the core concepts that are required in order to understand this particular concept. And then the water, which is where learning starts to flow, that's where we explicitly teach the content. And then we also give the students a guided practice question, just one question called a have a go question. So we've taught the concept. We ask the students to demonstrate their knowledge through the one have a go question. That's then marked off, and then we reach fire, which is where the learning is activated and where the students can complete that work independently, just under guidance. And then after, so that's where the students are completing their work independently. But if we're finding that students are struggling at the water stage, then that's where the teacher just keeps going through this, more and more examples. They keep repeating examples until the students have that aha moment, and then they just can't wait to, move on to the fire stage. And then after the fire stage, we have air, which is where learning starts to lift. And that's where students start completing extension questions. They start seeing the connections between concepts. So for that particular fire concept that I just mentioned before, adding fractions with uncommon denominators, the air questions might be an integrated question, which incorporates, measurement as well as fractions as well as decimals, right? So now they're seeing those interconnections. And finally, we have ether, which is complete mastery and independence, and that's homework. So that they're reinforcing that knowledge, and then the following week they have retrieval practices, which is having that quiz every single week. So they need to be able to demonstrate their knowledge independently before we move on to the next topic. So that's Spectrum in a nutshell.
Oh my God, this is incredible. It just makes me reflect on, I'm an old person now, but when I was in school, and I think it's just such a fascinating idea that somebody has, I guess, bothered to look at students and how they learn and create a system that actually supports them. I always reflect on my schooling experience and
Mm.
just think how, we never learned anything that I now use in the world. And I think, why didn't they teach that at school? I always say that about finance.
Mhm.
But also the way we were taught, it was very much, here's the textbook, read
Mhm.
the chapter, sink or swim. That's very much how I experienced schooling. And, so to hear that somebody has developed a system over, you said 25 years?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Wow, I just think it's amazing. And I can only imagine the parents as well who get to watch their child flourish in potentially areas that they might have been struggling in.
Yeah, now, amazingly, we have past students who are now bringing their own children to us,
Oh, wow, that's cool.
which just completely blows my mind because the first time you see somebody is where they always are, right? So it's like, aren't you 10 years old? Like, what are you
Yeah. But like what an amazing testimonial that somebody has come to you as a child
Yeah,
and is now bringing their children to you.
yeah,
Like that's
I know.
epic.
I know. I never thought that that would ever happen because I feel as though I got into this business just by accident, right?
Mm,
Because my brother was the one. And it was actually really interesting because I never saw myself as being the smart person, the person who would run an education center one day. I actually struggled quite a lot. I just remember there was this one time where I was in a composite class with my brother. We were in grade five, six, and the teacher was actually really struggling to teach fractions.
mm,
And, she just because she was my grade two teacher and she happened to teach, year five, six later on down the track. And that's the other thing about the Australian schooling system at the moment. It's very inconsistent.
mm,
It just relies on the individual teacher to be able to set the program for the students. And not all teachers will understand it at all the concepts at the same time. And so
mm.
so she was really struggling to teach this concept. And my brother was the one who said, "Oh, isn't it like this?" He wasn't being like a smartass or anything like that. He was just saying, like, don't you need to, make sure that the denominators are the same and then she's like, "Can you come up and teach?"
Wow.
Yeah. So,
That's wild.
and because of that, like, because I had such inconsistent
Mm,
experiences at school. Like it wasn't necessarily me, right? It was
yeah.
the system because the system is so inconsistent. And I just remember when we started hiring our staff for Spectrum. And my brother's model was that he only wanted to hire top performing university students, students who had achieved 99 plus, who were currently studying medicine, law, dentistry, who had experienced, who had very positive experiences at school. So
Mm,
therefore they can then, um, um, inspire the next generation of students and kind of pay it forward. And so when I was speaking to these amazing individuals at, during lunchtime. I was just asking them, like, how did you get 99.95, right? Because it seems like such a, such a like a far away concept. Like
Mm,
it's almost like it's completely out of reach for a lot of people. Like it's,
yeah.
so I would just ask them, how did you get 99.95? And they would just go through fairly simple strategies. They would have a mistakes book where they would just redo any questions answered incorrectly from their work that they got back. So they wouldn't just shove it, underneath their bed.
Yeah,
They
just
would
pretend that
actually,
didn't happen.
it's
Yeah.
like that didn't happen. I'm just going to figure out why I got this question wrong. Um,
Wow.
Also, a lot of them did about 30 to 50 exam papers, in the lead up to their final exams. And I don't remember even doing three,
I
right?
don't remember doing one.
That's right.
Oh my
Right.
God.
So the
Yes.
resources are there's just an imbalance in
Mm,
resourcing. The, what I was told at school was very different from what somebody else was told at school. And I spoke with this one person who achieved a 50 study score for English. And I asked her, like, what do you feel the secret to achieving these types of scores in English um, would be for other students? And she said it's just all about structure, right? Because the thing
mm.
is, when I was at school, I was just taught that there's no right or wrong answer with English, right? You just
Yeah.
write whatever. It's up to you. But in VCE, there's a rubric, right, that you
Yeah.
need to write towards and write to. And so she said, well, there's just a structure. So in the introduction, there are certain criteria that you need to reach. And then, the body paragraphs is like this and this and this. And it just completely blew my mind because I
Yeah.
was never taught this. And, I did okay. I didn't do terribly, but I just feel as though if we can, if we can find a way um, to just provide this information consistently to students, then
Mm,
it doesn't matter what school they go to, they can
yeah.
always get it at
Yeah.
Spectrum, right? That was what the whole philosophy was. And in the past we've had lots and lots of different students, but the main point that we like to emphasize is that all students are on their own spectrum, right?
Yeah.
We might have a student who is in year six, but then we might place them into year four English and maybe year eight maths because that's just where
Mm.
they are. We've had a student in the past who was in year two and we placed them into year 10 because that's
Wow.
what they could do.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's insane what some students can do, but in a class, they're just
That would
stuck.
never happen. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just stuck in that because it's just based on year level. And so when you think about
Mm.
if we just group students according to year level or by age, it's the same as saying that all 40-year-olds should all be the same,
Yeah.
should all be at the same level in business, in relationships, in
Yeah.
cognitive ability. And we know that that is not true, right? People will develop at their own pace and they have their own interests, and it's unfair to be able to group students in this way. So yeah.
This is so incredible. So, what role do you play in the business now?
Yeah, so I'm the founder.
Yep.
And so I set the vision and the direction for the business. And over this past year, I was on a bit of a sabbatical from the business because I have a 14-year-old daughter myself, and the way that she's being taught at school is not compatible with the intelligence age that we are heading
Mm.
into, that we are currently already in. Because the way that we've been teaching students has been the same way that we've been teaching students for the past 200 years.
Yeah.
It was in response to the industrial age where we needed all students to be the same in order
Mm.
to fill a particular role, in order to be productive. And we
Mhm.
needed, and that was absolutely the case in order to build the society that we have today. But now, the linear pathway that we've been taught this entire time is no longer working, right?
Mm.
So we can no longer rely on the do well at school, go to university, get a stable job because all those jobs, the majority of those
They
jobs
don't,
being
the jobs
taken over
don't
by AI,
exist. Yeah.
right? And
Oh,
so
wow.
in the end, it's actually just about helping children find out who they are meant to be in this world, what role
Mm,
they need to play in this world, what their passion is in this world, and then building the pathway for them to be able to achieve that goal, right? Because we've had so many of our own shooters in the past who have scored the 99, who have gotten into medicine, who have gotten into law, and by year five, they actually quit and
wow.
they retrained to become a teacher, and they just moved completely away from what they were initially trained to do because
Mm,
they were stuck into that in that trap of getting a high ATAR, so therefore you don't want to waste your marks, right?
mm,
They were passionate about teaching. That's why they got into this particular role in the first place. And then after the experience that they had, they realized that, you know what, this is actually what I want to do for life. I can't see myself as a doctor. I cannot see myself as a lawyer.
mm,
I can't see myself being placed into that role. This is the role that is for me. And that's
mm.
how it should be for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that's where we're headed as
Yes.
an organization. It's about helping students find out who they are,
Mm,
and to build the path that meets them where they are, as opposed to where we want them to be, right?
yeah.
And so over the past year, I built 4 apps through RMIT.
What?
They're all AI, you know, um, they're all AI based apps.
Mm,
So the one that relates to Spectrum is the Infinity Verse. So it's a completely AI adaptive learning system where
wow.
um, where um, it actually considers a student's emotional state before learning, because that's really important, right? Because
Wow.
if
Yep.
you think about it like this, you might have a student who arrives to school and they might have had an issue at home, they might have had an issue with their parents, they might be feeling a bit sick. There's not going to be any learning happening that day, right?
Mm,
If a student has had an issue at home and they're coming to class and they're learning fractions, well, they're not going to be learning anything. Whereas I feel like it's more important for the very first question to be asked to that student is, how are you feeling today? Right? How are you feeling today? And if they're feeling, and so we've got an AI that meets the student. So the way that the Infinity Verse works is the very first thing that the students, or the very first screen that the students encounter when they log in, is their own AI avatar that just asks
mm,
them, "How are you feeling today?" And if the student feels good, then we just, enter the Infinity Verse. If they're not feeling good, then it actually routes them to their own AI companion. And the AI companion will say, well, what's actually going on here? Right. So
mm.
it's more productive for that student to work through their challenges and their issues and their thoughts than it is to just go straight into the learning. So then after
Yeah.
they've had an opportunity um, to work through some of their thoughts and some of their issues, then the AI will give them a rating, like, how are you feeling about learning now? And if they're ready to learn, are you ready to learn now? Then it'll go into the system. Otherwise, they'll just spend that time figuring out or working through whatever challenges they're having.
Wow. So your students are using that at the moment at Spectrum, or
No, no. So we that's the Infinityverse. That's the next gen version of Spectrum. But what we do
cool.
at Spectrum um is we have reflections in every single class. So
Yep.
we always ask the students, how did you feel about class today? What do you still need help with? And
Mm,
that's part of our structure. Um,
yep.
because then, we'll be able to resolve that by the end of the class. If it's just something very simple, then the tutor can just address that. But I just feel
Mm,
as though, a lot of these structures are missing in our schools at the moment. We
yeah,
don't really
absolutely.
consider we don't really consider the students' state. Um,
Mm,
because there are a lot of challenges happening at schools, and it's not the teacher's fault whatsoever. It's just what happened after COVID. What happened after
mm,
COVID was that we found that students were 2 years behind. And so,
Wow.
and so when the students returned to the classroom, the teachers at the time were under tremendous pressure to bring the
Mm,
children back up again from parents, from the students themselves, from administration, from the administrators, from media, right? Or like,
mm,
we need to bring our children back up to speed. So then what happened? Teachers quit, right? We
mm,
have a severe shortage of teachers right now, um, where teachers don't even have the resources. And we did a study just after COVID where we provided our multi-level assessment to a cohort of year 7 students at a high school. And we found that the range of abilities was anywhere from year 3 to year 8 within that 1 year level.
wow.
And this happens everywhere. That was only one
Mm,
random class, right? So
mm,
we found that, and that's what happens when you group students according to their age, not according to their ability. So we had
mm,
students in that class who were still learning how to add and subtract. And we had students on the other end of the spectrum who could do advanced problem solving around algebra. And yet
wow.
we're teaching them all the same thing at the same time. So teachers do not have the like, imagine the class teacher who has to deal with all of those levels at once. How do
Mm,
you how do you meet each of those students at their
yeah.
level? You just can't, right? So that's where our 5 band system comes in, because we assume that students are going to start 2 year levels below where they're at, and then we bring them all the way through to extension and to mastery. That's why we don't teach at the core, um, which is what the norm is in Australian schools. It's to teach to the middle, and we've all heard that, right? We teach to the core, we teach to the middle. But imagine, a student who, I just mentioned being at a year 3 level, being in that year 7 class, and the teacher comes in, the teacher walks in and she immediately teaches um, how to add fractions with uncommon denominators. Like, how's that student supposed to
Mm,
even engage with that? They just don't. So then the way that we would deal with that is we just assume that students are going to be 2 levels below. So now we're going to teach them or to revise our multiplication and division, and then we move up. And so students who are not within that band range, so just say that core level is year 7, if we've assessed the student to be lower than the year 5, because that's year 5 to year 9 in that band, right? That's what the students have access to. That's where intervention comes in, right? Where we have teacher aides coming in, where we withdraw the students from the class, and then they work with booklets that are more towards their band. So we're always
mm.
able to meet the students where they're at, and that's how we get engagement from the students, as opposed to just saying, "Well, you're in year 7, you're learning this."
Figure it out. So,
But
is there ever a world where your system makes its way into Australian schools, or will this rely on parents saying, I want better for my children and coming to you privately?
yeah, so we've just been selected as one of the preferred suppliers for Australian schools.
Oh
So
my God, this is
it's
so awesome.
Yeah, so what that means is, we've got the year prep to year 12 curriculum all
Hmm.
mapped out, all banded. And when I talk about bands, it's per concept. It's not even for year level, right? So
Wow.
every single concept starts again from -2 to +2.
Mm,
So we've got that already, and we've got a digital bookstore where schools can jump on and they can just purchase books for their classes, for their schools. They can just work on intervention if they want to. They can just do a homework program if they want to. And we white label them to schools so they don't even need to know that it's from Spectrum, right?
wow. Yep.
And it's all mapped to the latest AC9 curriculum. And that's how we'll be able to support teachers, because everything's all mapped out. Teachers don't have to reinvent the wheel. And that's the thing.
Mm,
The teacher that I mentioned, she had been teaching year 2 for very, very long time. And then all of a sudden she was placed into the year 5, 6 class. She now has no material. So
yeah.
it's up to her to be able to build that from scratch.
Wow.
and there's no, and that's just how schools are, and that's how schools operate. And, and when I was doing my teaching round, or like when I was at university myself, I was yeah, I was doing a Bachelor of Teaching and the primary stream, and there was a hurdle requirement. And I'm lifting a bit of the lid on this at the moment. So yeah, but this is what I saw. So there was a hurdle requirement where you needed to do a very basic maths test in order to pass. The extent of it was maybe percentages in order to be able to teach in Australian primary schools. Some people failed that 3 times.
Wow.
And so now what we've got are teachers actually teaching in schools who don't really understand maths,
Oh my God. Yeah.
right?
This
So
scares
I
me.
remember, I remember, do you have children yourself?
No, I don't.
Okay. So at the end of one year, there was a student who had just gotten a scholarship the previous year, and he came up to the desk to re-enroll. And, and he traveled 45 minutes to attend the campus that I was at, which was the Footscray campus at the time. And and I said to him, congratulations, you must have worked really, really hard. How are you going at Spectrum at the moment? And he said, I absolutely love Spectrum. And I said, oh, I'm curious, like, why do you love Spectrum so much? And he said, I'll tell you a story. This is an 11-year-old child who said this to me. He said, at the start of the year, my teacher taught us fractions, and it was only a few weeks ago that he taught us division. Now, it would have made more sense for the teacher to have taught division
Oh,
or fractions, right?
yeah.
Because when I was doing my teaching rounds, what I saw was, one day the teacher would be teaching addition. The following day, they would be teaching capacity. The following day, they would be teaching subtraction. The day after that, they would be teaching geometry. It's like there was no continuity. And that's not how you
Mm,
teach maths, right?
mm,
Maths is all about building blocks. And so if you're not building those blocks properly, then what will happen is that students will say, I'm not good at maths.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
I'm not good
Yep.
at maths, but it's not them. It's because the system itself, has been designed so that you've just got this fragmented system where people are just randomly doing things.
Mm.
And there's just no program or no structure in schools at the moment. I mean, I went to a networking, I mean, I can just keep going on.
Well, it's actually really interesting because I feel like as well, something you've sort of alluded to, it must be really frustrating for the teachers as well, right? If I feel like they don't have a system of support, and I'm sure a lot of them got into it because they wanted to make an impact and wanted to, help the next generation flourish, but they don't have the tools either.
Mhm. They don't.
Wow.
They
I
absolutely.
feel like if I was a teacher and in the system feeling frustrated, I would want to come and work for you. I would be like, please give me something.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like our tutors who were so spoilt with our system,
Yeah.
um, when they became teachers themselves and they had to build their own curriculum, there was this one, I've got this one tutor who is now one of our franchisees, and she works as a teacher in a school at the moment. She said that when she was on teaching rounds, the school was so understaffed that her
Mm.
methods at that time were business management and mathematics. And she arrived to school one day and they said to her, can you teach year 11 legal studies? And she said, well, I've never really taught legal studies before, but because she was a pre-service teacher, I'll give it a go. Like if you can
Hmm.
give me the resources, then sure. Right. So this school taught via PowerPoint. Like everybody just teaches via slide decks. So they had a
Wow.
slide deck from the previous year, and they said to her, well, you can't use this slide deck, but here are 3 pages from the textbook. Go and build your own slide deck.
Oh my God. What?
She doesn't have a background in legal studies. She's never had any background or no exposure to legal
Wow.
studies at all, but she was expected to build a new resource from scratch where one already existed. This
Wow.
this is insane.
Insanity? Yeah, it's
Insane.
literally the word. Yeah.
So school, and so she had to spend that night building this slide deck for nothing
Mm.
when there was one that already existed. So teachers are frustrated because they need to build they need to rebuild resources that already exist.
Wow.
Make any sense. And so it's an expectation that you rebuild your own resources.
Wow. That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make
Why
any
reinvent the wheel? It's striking me like it's like what I'm seeing right now is you have this incredible like business brain, entrepreneurship, innovation, like you can see the bigger picture and you've taken that and applied it to education. And I just feel like it's so sad that we don't have that thinking in the education system.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because education, I feel, sits in its own
Bubble.
in its own bubble, right?
Yeah.
Even before NAPLAN, like,
Mm.
NAPLAN was the year where when they introduced NAPLAN, it was finally the year where parents finally got to understand at least where their child sits because there are some schools at the moment that have no homework policies.
Wow.
So so students actually miss out on the habits that are formed from doing homework,
Mm.
um, from being able to reinforce what was taught, like that whole five-band system, that independence and mastery is really
Yeah.
important for that long-term memory, um, or the long-term retrieval. And so, there are some schools that have no homework policies, and so then parents are really left in the dark as to what their children are actually doing at school, right? So
Yeah.
then when we finally had NAPLAN, I was like, oh, hang on a second, why is my child here? Right? Okay, now maybe I need some support.
Mm.
Or, oh, they're actually doing quite well. Maybe they can go for a scholarship or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
it just gives data, it just gives information that parents may not have had before.
Mm.
And so, but you hear every single year there's this whole backlash around NAPLAN. Nobody, there are people who boycott it and all of these things. But what I see is that it's just a data point that
Mm.
is useful for anybody to understand, right? For parents, for students, for schools, for teachers to understand. So yeah, education is just in its own little bubble that where and I suppose there's just this status quo because that's how we're taught at university, right?
Mm.
It's about personalizing learning, but when you personalize without a structure, it just becomes chaos. How do you personalize learning for 25 students? You just can't.
Exactly. You can't.
Right? So the way that it works for us is that, we start 2 year levels below, and then we actually get some students up to a point where they are independent, right? In our
Mm.
fire level. So now, because we've got that structure, it then gives the teacher space to be able to work with those students who may need that extra support in the earth and the water levels.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Wow. Now, so you also mentioned franchises a couple of times. So you've gone from, so this is wild, your brother tutoring students one-on-one to coming into your parents' office space to now building the business and expanding into franchise. Like, this is
Yeah.
wild. This is so incredible. How many franchises or franchisees do you now have?
Yeah. So we've got 16 locations
Yeah.
around Melbourne. And of the 16 locations, we have 5 different franchisees. So a few of them have multiple sites.
Wow. So what was that process like? Taking your IP, taking your model, and I guess empowering somebody to run it as their own business.
Yeah, I mean, that was crazy. It was crazy.
You
So,
thought tackling education was hard. Wait till you do
yeah, yeah.
franchising. Yeah.
But again, for me, I just flow. It's
Yeah.
it's one of those things, right, where I think it might just be the almost like the feminine energy, right, that we have
Mm,
where we just flow instead of we push, we just
mm.
flow. So all throughout my life, even getting into my business in the first place, I wasn't really supposed to do that. My initial degrees were in commerce and arts, and
Oh, wow.
my dream was to be in some corner office in being an accountant somewhere.
Wow, that's so funny.
And
Oh, I
in
love
the
it.
end, because what happened, that crossroads was that, I was doing my degrees, and I had no intention of continuing on with Spectrum after I finished my degrees. It was supposed to just be a weekend job.
Mm.
But by the time I graduated, I had 300 students out of nowhere. And so then I thought, well, okay, well, I've got a legitimate business here. Should I close it, right? Or should I just go back to uni and study teaching and how to teach properly?
Mm.
And, obviously I chose the second path. Um, but in terms of franchising, it started because, I've got an email list and we've got an online bookstore as well, where we just have exam packs because one of our specializations is scholarship and select entry preparation for students. And I just received this email, and I would always get these emails. I would always get all these cold emails where people would say, "Oh, are you looking to franchise your business?" And I'd be like, "Well, it just seems like such a long and expensive process. No, thank you." Right? No, thank you. And there was just this one person, and she sent me a message and she said, I downloaded one of your exam packs and I used it for my students. I have a tuition center already, but I don't know how to scale it, right? And
Mhm.
I really like your model. Are you interested in franchising? And I said, well, not really. Maybe sometime in the future, but I really appreciate, and usually it just stops at that. And then she messaged me again about a month later and said, "Are you ready for franchising now?" I said,
I love the persistence. Yes.
I don't know, like no, well, no, but thank you.
Mm,
And I said maybe sometime in the future, right? Like far,
mm.
far future. 6 months later, she messaged me again.
Wow.
I was really, she's really interested and she's really persistent. There's something here. Any of the other
Mm.
it's not like any of the other inquiries. Like this is a serious inquiry.
Yes.
It just so happened that, I was just in the car one time and just driving past. Are you in Melbourne or
No,
are
I'm
you in?
Perth.
Perth.
Yeah.
So in Melbourne, there's exhibition buildings, and just at the time I was driving past the exhibition buildings, and on the radio, just at that point, they said there's a franchise expo happening at the exhibition buildings.
Oh my God.
I said, oh, and this person's words were
Mm.
just replaying in my mind. I said, well, maybe there's something here, right? I may as well explore. And they said, free entry. And so I
The
was like,
universe is like, would
yeah,
you just go, woman?
well, that's all right. It's like there are all these signs here, just go in already. And so I walked in and I was recent, I just went around to all the different franchise consultants and the price range was anywhere between, 15,000 to somewhere over 250,000
Wow.
and to franchise a business. And then I met this person and, I had a chat with him and he said, "Oh, wow, like you guys are ready for franchising like last year. I believe in you so much that I'm willing to fly down from Sydney every single month to mentor you myself." That's what he said.
Wow.
Wow, like that's really amazing. And so I thought about it a little bit more. And then I went to work on the weekend and I spoke with my assistant at the time and I said to her, I went to, like, what did you do on the weekend? I went to the franchising expo and she'd been with me for 6 years at that time. And she said, "Oh, if you're doing an information session on franchising, can I come along as well?" And I said, "I had no idea that you were interested, right?"
Mm.
And I said to her, "Well, what actually interests you about franchising?" She said, "Well, I see the way that parents come up to you and, they thank you for how you've transformed their children's lives. And one day I dreamed that it would happen to me as well, right?"
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible. Yeah.
And so then, I ended up taking on those two.
Mm.
And so they became my first franchisees. And because I had somebody internal already,
Yes.
she already knew the business. And so I got
Yeah.
somebody external. We were then able to build that franchising model as we went.
Mm.
I just
Yeah.
built it in real time because they both believed in the model.
Yes.
So it just really, and I was going through something really difficult at the time. So that was a really good distraction for me to be able to
Mm.
build something and to know that people just believed in me, right? Even
Yeah.
before
Wow.
I believed in myself. And that really helped, yeah, build out the model. So I just built it as I went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible. I love it. Oh my God, I could talk to you all day, but I'm looking at the time now. Now, as I said, I could absolutely talk to you about this all day. I feel like we're going to have to get you back on the podcast now. But I always love to wrap up these podcasts with one last piece of advice. So, reflecting on your time in business, what would be a piece of advice that you would give to another woman on her business journey?
You systematize everything. Everything. You need to document everything. So for me, when I started repeating a task maybe 2 or 3 times, I was like, okay, I need to outsource this now.
Mm,
I need to delegate this to somebody else, right?
yes.
Any repeatable tasks need to be delegated because your time is worth so much money, right? Your time is the most valuable thing that you could ever have.
Mm,
So yeah, documenting everything. I use Trello just to. I mean, now when I'm doing my when I'm brainstorming my chat GPT, just having
yes.
different lists for things,
Mhm.
different boards for things, and then it's just really easy to then move that card to somebody else's Trello board, right?
Mhm.
Everybody's got Trello boards in my organization, and so then I can just move it to whoever it needs to be delegated to, right? Yeah, systematizing everything. So using tools like Loom to just capture everything so that you've got resources, and that's the only way that I could scale
Mm.
because in order to have somebody be able to run the business just like me, like what's really wild for me is that we hire top performing university students, and when I go to new franchise sites just to check things out and to visit, and I watch an 18-year-old teaching exactly the same way as me.
Yeah.
That is insane, right? And
Yeah.
they teach better than many of the classrooms that I've actually observed in
Mm.
Australian schools right now because they follow a particular structure and they make sure that all the students are being met where they're at as opposed to where we want them to be. So systematizing absolutely everything is my yeah, is my piece of advice.
I love it. And I think that is one of my favorite answers.
Hmm.
So, Tui, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your story and your wisdom with the Spark community. That was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danielle.
That wraps another episode of Spark TV. Shout out to Spark TV sponsor IP Australia for their amazing support of the Spark podcast and women in business. And if no one tells you today, you've got this.